About 2 years ago, Elizabeth, or the Charismatic Voice, as a lot of people know her, released a video that was quite literally the start of groundbreaking harsh vocal studies, where she got Will Ramos from Lorna Shore. And they shoved a bunch of cameras down his throat so they could see his vocal folds while he was doing different styles of harsh vocals. And then shortly after that, they grabbed Will again, and they shoved a bunch of needles in his throat for more studies. And these studies were conducted with some of the top vocal researchers in the world at the University of Utah. And now, a couple years later, Elizabeth has just announced that she is doing one of the biggest, most groundbreaking harsh vocal studies that's ever been done, again, with researchers from the University of Utah. And this time, instead of doing the study with one person, they've actually got a whole pool of people from different backgrounds, male and female vocalists that can do harsh vocals and clean vocals. So they're expecting to see a wide range of results from this. This is quite literally the most in-depth study that's ever been done on harsh vocals, which I personally believe is needed because a lot of vocal studies that have been done on clean vocals. This is the reason that we don't have specific terminology for a lot of harsh vocal techniques. Now, considering the amount of artists and the transportation and the lodging and the researchers and the facilities, this is a very expensive project. And I saw that the Charismatic Voice has started a nonprofit organization for this. They've even started a Kickstarter where people can contribute if they would like to. And there's some cool rewards and stuff that they get from that. And if anybody's interested in checking that out, I will link that in the description of this video. And before I keep talking and say too much, I'm just going to stop myself right here because originally I had planned to do a big in-depth video on this where I was going to do my own independent research, try and find out exactly what tests they were going to be doing and seeing exactly where they were going to be doing this and all of that other stuff. But you know what? I just figured what better way to get information than to just go directly to the source. So for the rest of this video, let's just welcome in Elizabeth, the Charismatic Voice.
Hi.
Hey, it's great to have you back on the channel. It's been a while.
It's nice to see you and hang with you.
Yeah, of course. And being a parent as well, both of us are. I know how busy and crazy things are, so I'll keep this less chatty for me because I am a talkative person, and we'll pretty much just get directly to the point on this one. So I've kind of earlier in the video introed the background to the new project that's going on, but I think the best way to do this would be, can you tell me about the project in the Kickstarter that you guys have recently started for this vocal research study?
Yeah, the boiler down sentence is we are raising money to fund vocal research. Now, there's a lot more that goes into that, but we're doing this through a Kickstarter, through crowdfunding, and I'm blown away by how supportive our community has been. We actually have already made the minimum goal to make it possible, but there's a lot more we can still do. And the study that we're going to be doing is the most in-depth study ever done on harsh vocals, really upper laryngeal structures. So we're talking about all of the things that are above your true vocal folds that make our like goblin cookie monster sounds. And we're bringing in professional singer-screamers to study because they use those structures more dynamically than we've ever seen used before. The extra benefits of a Kickstarter also is people also can get rewards for donating. So
Of course.
If you guys like reaction analysis videos, cool, you can get some more. Or there's voice lessons, though those are sold out now. But there are lots of extra rewards that people can get by helping support vocal research.
Nice. I love that you said like cookie monster and like goblin noises, because that's one of the things that I think is important with this. It's like up until now with harsh vocals and metal, those are the terms we have, like goblin, cookie monster, pig squeal. Like there's no official terms for what these techniques are because it really hasn't been studied. But, you know, last year, was it? I think it was just last year. Might be my concept of time right now is like warped. A little while ago, you did a pilot study with Will from Lorna Shore with that documentary that you released. And it was very cool. Like it was so cool to see other people get into that scientific study with Will that normally wouldn't. Like my mother-in-law, who does not listen to metal and does not like harsh vocals, she actually watched it and she's like, this is fascinating. Like she couldn't stop watching it. So considering you've already done it before, why more artists? Like, what are you hoping to achieve this time that you may not have last time?
Yeah, the big goal here is to learn how this is broadly applicable. We saw more movement in Will's throat than we've ever seen before. And there have been studies that have studied specific things about growls or distortion, but it was with metal and rock singers and often just top down. As far as what we were able to gather, this is much, much more thorough in all of the data, a lot deeper. And we only have data from one person. Everyone's anatomy is different. So
Mm-hmm.
how Will achieves a goblin sound, or what he calls a goblin sound, might not be how Tati achieves
Mm-hmm.
a similar sound, right? And we're also talking about male and female there, so that's
Yeah.
going to be crazy. I think that we cannot make generalizations about how these sounds are created or maybe how these structures can be moved until we have a larger group of people that we've studied.
Yeah, no, I actually agree. It's like you said, everybody's body is different. We talk about that with a lot of different things, even with like guitar and bass playing. Like I have relatively smaller hands than some other bass players. So when I watch some other bass players doing the things they do, I'm like, I don't think I can physically do that. So for vocalists, it's the same thing. It's cool to see how they're physically able to pull that off. And this first round that you have coming up, I'm so intrigued by the people you got to do this. We've got Travis from Cattle Decapitation, Elisa from Arch Enemy, Phil from Whitechapel, Spencer from Periphery, and Melissa from Ad Infinitum. Uh, is that correct? Did I
Yeah,
miss
yeah,
some?
we have Tati. Then I mentioned Tati from Ginger. We also have Mark from Cardivox Academy, who's like kind of a bonus artist in there.
Oh,
I know it's really, really cool. We're gonna help support that as well. So, because I've seen him do these sounds, and he's not only is he doing them with Kardashev, his band,
mhm.
but he also is teaching them and helping spread good information online. We asked that he be a part of this study. So not only can he get us the good information, but he can actually really help to spread that and get that out to everyone so that people stop thinking that these sounds destroy voices.
Yeah. I didn't bring Tati from Ginger up because I I think from what I read, the first group was only 6 people, but it's not. Is Tatiana in that one?
Oh, it's six people still, and Tati's in it. Yeah, Mark is like a bonus seventh, and yeah, it's sort of amazing. She's in that first group. We're actually
Oh,
going to be sending that group through in two different stages too,
okay.
just so people think first group. This is the first group of funded, the minimum amount that makes sense for expanding the study. But we'll have a group like stage one and stage two. And stage one, I think we're trying to get it scheduled for the end of this November, which is really, really like coming in
Oh,
soon.
that's soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just counting in my head because I realized I was like 6 people, but I only said 5. So that was me brain farting. I didn't sleep much last night. My kid
Counting is
kept me up.
hard,
Sorry.
right? I
Um,
know kids.
but but with all of these people that are involved, uh, what kind of tests did you make Will go through? Like, can you explain it? Like, we saw them on the video, but can you kind of explain a little more, like what Will went through? And are you making these 6 artists, or 7 if you count Mark, go through the same process, or are there new things that you're going to try with them?
Oh man, the new things at the end actually is like it's developing right now, which is super exciting.
Okay. Yeah,
More on
yeah.
that. Um, so the first time we brought Will in and just put a camera down his throat, that was the first video we put out where we saw the movements. That wasn't actually considered our official pilot study. Our official pilot study was done earlier this year. We released that video in, I think it was the end of May.
Hmm.
And that's where we put Will through a series of procedures that were much more in depth and designed to gather the most information ever gotten. Uh, that included multiple times of a camera going down his throat. Poor guy. He's such a champ. It has really extensive acoustic testing, which people can do. And that's something that's not unique to the University of Utah's otolaryngology's lab. The things that were wild that we did, one is putting these electrodes into muscles surrounding the larynx, both outer and inner.
Yeah.
And I cannot believe the guy that does this. He like places it by hand. A lot of people when they do this, there are not many people that do this, but the people that do often will use guidance from different sound or like ultrasound that's helping. He knows how to do it by hand and guides like little. It's almost like acupuncture. They do lidocaine first to numb it up, and then we'll guide like a needle tiny wire in and then pull it out and there's like this like plastic line that's hanging out that measures muscle activation and that is really really intense. It gathers incredible data.
Hmm.
But there we might possibly alter. There's been discussions about like the base of the tongue was probably more difficult to manage than we expected. So we might alter that a little bit depending on what we find in the other tests with artists. So they're prepared to shift that. And if an artist decides they don't want to do that test, we say, of course, I'm never going to force somebody to do a procedure that is scary. And then the other one that's also really wild is DMRI. This one is just an MRI machine, but it's video. And there's a contraption that goes around the neck that was actually designed by one of the guys that was there with us last time and is able to capture these images in real time and see the whole picture. Because anytime we put a scope into a person's throat, so a video that's looking down, usually, especially for harsh vocalists, which we've just found out, you don't want to use a rigid scope because that's like a piece of metal that just goes like this, and most people gag on anyway. But the constrictions are so much higher in the throat than they are for clean singing. And it's a lot of movement. It's really hard to have a rigid scope back there and do those. Lots of gagging. So we go up the nose and through the nasal passage and then down your soft palate. It's like the worst COVID test ever at first.
Yeah.
But you're numbed up, so it's really not that bad. I've had so many of these done, I've lost track. And then there's this little camera that's like dangling down and has this bird's eye view. But the main issue with this and any of the research that's been done so far is that if you have a constriction that's high, you can't actually see below that. It obscures your view.
Oh,
So DMRI is crucial, and EMG allows you to see that muscle activation even when you can't see it from above.
that's wild. Like
Yeah.
like even when you guys did the first round with Will, I found it so as somebody who's not a vocalist, even me, I found it so fascinating. And what I thought was really, really standoutish and cool was, when we were seeing like the camera, Will's vocal folds and stuff, there were parts where I was like, well, I didn't know folds could do that. And then when I heard the other scientists you were with say the same thing, I was like, oh, wow. I was like, so this is like truly new discovery stuff because like you've already mentioned, most of the vocal research that's been done is with clean vocals and not harsh. So I'm like legitimately excited about this because I'm very curious to see what it can do for just harsh vocalists in the future and for vocal health too, because we've seen so many singers in the past, in metal and stuff completely blow out their voices because they don't understand the actual technique of what they're doing. And I think that's a very important thing for people to remember is that I would say the majority of harsh vocalists in bands out there taught themselves how to make these noises and don't actually know how they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard that so much where people say, "Yeah, I have no idea what I'm doing." And that's fine. Like no one had any idea what they were doing. Will had no idea what he's doing. His throat like rotates 90 degrees when he's making these sounds. Can you imagine? You're
Yeah,
like,
it's insane.
like, what? And he didn't know that. And that's okay. Like you don't have to know what you're doing to make an awesome sound and make us really want to understand how you're making the awesome sound.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So going back to kind of the beginning of this, we were talking about the Kickstarter and raising money to do all of this. You guys created a nonprofit for this.
Mhm.
And something I saw online that I thought like was kind of a good question was, why start a new nonprofit instead of having people like donate directly to the University of Utah for this study?
Yeah, that actually, it's kind of a complex question. First of all, it's really hard to start a nonprofit. So, like, why go through all of that pain?
Yeah.
Um, there, there's different ways you can donate to universities, and if you're going to make a bigger donation, like what we're making, to cover all of the research and all of the procedures, that's a larger grant, and we can say exactly where it's going to go to. If you're making smaller donations, you're not applying it with a specific grant. You can't necessarily say where it's going to go to. So we wanted to combine crowdfunding into one big sum. Additionally, it's not just the University of Utah that's a part of this. The Charismatic Voice is organizing all of the travel, like all of
Of
the
course. Yep.
flying and the accommodations. Uh, it's the connections that we have with the artists that makes it possible to bring them in. So Charismatic Voice, and it's all being paid through the research fund. I have to be really specific about this because Charismatic Voice, meaning my company and all of us working underneath it, we actually cannot make a single penny from the Kickstarter. That's another reason we have this nonprofit in place because we want people to have that financial transparency. Like I'm not gonna
Yeah.
go take a couple $100,000 and get myself a sports car. First of all, I have
And
no
and
desire.
in the world we're living in right now, that is it actually the as you started explaining this, I was like, the world we're in right now, that gives people peace of mind and transparency to know that like you will have proof to show that like, hey, we're not just keeping some of it and buying cool things. Like it's going to
Yeah.
the university. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going directly to the research, and the biggest sum is university, but the research fund also pays for those accommodations and
Hmm.
flights for the artists, food while they're there. Actually, I'm not sure that we calculated that in. That might be something that Charismatic Voice donates. So,
Yeah.
I to this point, I have been putting my own money into it, and it
Hmm.
is a lot of money.
Well, I mean, no, it really is like the minimum funding that you had on the first Kickstarter, which has been met. Congratulations, by the way. Was $235,000. And even I'll admit, even for me, when I first saw it, I was like, that's a lot. Now, me knowing, being a tour manager, knowing how much travel and accommodations and stuff are, I started doing math in my head and I get it. But um, again, going back to things I've seen other people say, like that is a lot of money. Like diving in deeper to that, I mean, what exactly, you kind of have covered a lot of it, but like, what exactly are you guys taking care of and paying for with that money, like for the artists and stuff like that?
Well, they're the biggest chunk is definitely paying for the research team. Um, uh, when you think about who's working on this, it's multiple people. When we put out a paper, and we're going to have lots of papers that come from this. Gosh, I was trying to calculate how many authors we would have even on the first paper, and I think it's over 10. That's
Wow.
it's a lot of people.
Hmm.
And some people are working a lot of their hours every day on this, and some people aren't. But when you start calculating salaries for how long people are working on this and just supporting it for a year, um, that's the biggest chunk of money. And when you do a grant to a university, there's also things like facility fees. So their researchers are working in top of the line facilities, and they have all of this incredible equipment. They have the best, way to gather data possible, but they still have to pay for electrical, right? They still have
Of
to,
course. Yeah.
right? All of those fees for the facility. Part of the research fund, actually, any grant, any government grant that goes to the university has to pay some for the facilities because we're using them. And I think that it's important to remember, okay, a year of people studying this data, when you start to think it's actually, so 235 is the minimum level. That's also brought down a little bit because the University of Utah donated some money and Charismatic Voice is donating some money to bring
Hmm.
it from 250 down to 235. And that amount, when you add then all of the travel, all of the organization around, like I'm just donating time as far as coordinating artists and thing. But when we talk about Airbnbs or hotels and food, and then add that all into all of the research, There's also things like prices for publishing a paper that get wrapped in. And there's we have to have accountants as well that are tracking everything. All of the public records, or all of the records for the nonprofit, are public, and accountants help us make sure that everything is being filed correctly. So lots goes into that number.
Yeah, and I think you were bringing up like the researchers at the university and stuff too. I think when people take a look at this stuff at first glance, because you are prominent on YouTube, they think that this is probably just you doing something to make YouTube content. When in reality, some of the researchers that are going to be with you, I mean, we've seen from previous videos, there's some of the top vocal scientists like in the world. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's like it's
When I say I'm working with the top research team in the world, I really mean it.
yeah,
There are great research teams around the world, don't get me wrong, but uh, Dr. Ingo Tietze is the person that attracted me to the University of Utah, and that's because I was obsessed with his papers on straw phonation. He is like he literally coined the word vocology, which is voice science, the study of voice. He's the godfather of it, and he's there on this project in the room with us. So,
yeah.
wow.
And I imagine that's probably going to be pretty cool for the artists that are involved in this too, because as we've said, a lot of these artists are probably self-taught and they've never actually sat down with a vocal scientist or anybody to do this kind of stuff. So it's probably going to be very cool for them too.
Hmm.
One thing that I did notice too, though, is so the minimum goal on Kickstarter has been met for this project, but it is still open and there are still people donating. So if that minimum goal has been met and there's more funds and donations coming in, um, is that needed? And what are you going to use that additional funding for?
Oh man. If like in a dream world for me, I could raise $1 million for this, and every penny of it would go to fantastic use. I'd be able to bring in 12 or 13 artists, right? I'd love to be able to expand. If we get to a certain tier, we'll be able to open it up to 3 more artists. And one of the artists that has already said he wants to come in and do this is Devin Townsend, who has like the most amazing
Yes.
things, right?
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful we'll get there. It's most of the money in Kickstarters are made on the first couple days. So it's like, are we gonna get there? But maybe we'll see. We're gonna keep pushing. But even earlier than that, there's a couple of things that we almost wrapped it into the minimum funding goal. We were super close to doing it, but we decided to break it out just to make sure we could eke out getting our 6, 7 artists in.
Yeah.
I think the next goal is about videographer. For us, we really want to have a professional videographer on site.
Yeah.
That is expensive considering how much time. It's 3 full days for an artist to go through these tests. So that's a lot of time for a videographer to be on site. But I'd love to be able to make documentary, like really high level quality videos of this to help spread and get the word out, document everything, maybe even be able to submit it to something like Netflix in the future. So professional videographer for me is one of the most important things. Research assistants or getting more people available to help with the research, help it flow more smoothly is important as well. And just more time, because the data gathered, there's no way the research team is actually going to get through all of it in a year.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
We put a year as our minimum because that gets things started. That gets some papers out there. But really, they asked us originally for 5 years. And we're like,
Wow.
we can't do this. We can't, there's no way we're going to raise enough money for 5 years. And so we brought it back down, and in our stretch goals, there's up to 3 years of research support. And that gives you an idea of how much data there will be to comb through. Another one of the stretch goals helps us to get the data onto essentially a protected website. We want all of the data with permission of the artist. Okay, of course, if there's ever something that we discover that an artist wants to be kept private, we're going to keep it private. I will never put an artist at risk. But that data, most of them are really excited about making it public, and that would become available then to other researchers to analyze and use in their research. That's key to me because most researchers are they really want to be first to publish on this thing, and there's a certain there can be a certain hoarding of data. And I think with this, with there not being much of it done out there, my goal is not to be first in any way. I just to get as much data out as possible so that we can have everybody using and analyzing that data. So one of those tiers is to help us get that out. It is difficult when you have privatized data. Uh, yeah, you have to be really careful about how you share it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's to me that's pretty admirable too, because there's a lot of people out there that don't want to share their, I guess, tricks of the trade and research and secrets and stuff like that. Like people like to keep that information private. One of the things you were talking about, the artists and sharing the results of what happens with them. I'm really curious. I don't mean to put you on the spot. I know what my answer is, and this is not to single anybody out because every vocalist that's in this first group is absolutely exceptional. But is there any one artist that you're just like, man, I really can't wait to see the results from what they do? Is there anybody that stands out to you that you're just really intrigued by?
Oh man, that's like asking like what my favorite band I've ever reacted to is. Um, there's so many different reasons I'm excited about each one. I think there is one thing in particular that I'm excited about that I could sort of say like, what is the thing I like, the one thing I want to discover the most? I want to understand better the differences between male and female anatomy. Um, like even today, I analyzed Dream Stealer from Arch Enemy, and someone said in chat, "Oh, Elisa, is this weird to say that I think Elisa sounds like a guy?" And I said, "No, not at all. She's using different anatomy to make these sounds than the ones that we often associate with gender. So not the true folds, right? And that anatomy up until now, and the sound that's been established with it has mostly been associated with males.
Mm-hmm.
So I really want to understand if there's any sort of difference in the size of the anatomy, because the size of the true vocal folds is one of the things that we can look at to perhaps get a hint of difference between male and female, or something else between vocal
I mean,
folds.
it's a really excellent point you just brought up because I've said that a lot. Like harsh vocals and metal bands in general have always stereotypically been male driven, and that's why I feel like it's starting to die down now. But there, for the longest time, people were always like, "Oh, that's a girl doing harsh vocals," and
Yeah.
it's like you've come across that too. But the reality is some of the female harsh vocalists out there now, like we did a festival a few weeks ago where Ginger played
Mm.
right before Electric Callboy's set, and I was just listening to Tati live, and I feel like she has a more powerful voice than most of the dudes in the other bands that I heard the rest of the day. And it's not a knock on
Mhm.
them. It's just like you said, it goes back to people's anatomy and their physical makeup. Like it would be interesting to see like how she is that powerful compared to other male vocalists that are doing that. And
Exactly.
and there are other situations that blow my mind too. Like there are singers in like the deathcore world right now that have brutally deep guttural voices, and you would usually associate that with like somebody large. And
Hmm.
when I've met these people in person, they're smaller than me. So I'm like, I don't know. Like I'm just so curious to see the results of this. And mine, by the way, just because I got to throw it out there, is Travis Ryan, because for me, when I saw that you announced him on there, I got so excited because in my opinion, without Travis Ryan, I mean, he kind of coined some of the noises that are popular now. Like without him, you wouldn't have some of the singers that are in popular bands doing what they're doing. Like, and if you go through his history, what he's done vocally, it's just wild. So while I am excited about everybody, Travis is the one for me that I'm just like, I cannot wait to see what happens with this. Like,
He was also the person that was, I think, probably brought up the most when we put out feelers and saying, whose throat would you like to see down? And I really knew nothing about him, but people just kept saying his name. They're like, you have to look down Travis's throat. So
but even for me as a metalhead, the whole list that you have is like incredible. Like I've been listening to like Spencer with Periphery for God, over a decade, actually more than over a decade at this point. And he's also been one of those people to me that's had a very unique voice when I listen to metal, and not just with his harsh tones, but with his cleans as well and his range. So, um, and I know you had said like obviously some of these vocalists also do clean vocals, so I assume you're going to implement some of those things, especially probably transitioning from harsh to clean and stuff like that.
All of them also do clean vocals, which is pretty cool because it's really helpful in the data that we also gather some on their cleans and compare like the muscle activation of their cleans to the muscle activation of their harshes.
I don't know if I've ever heard Travis sing what we consider clean though. Like
He does.
Travis's clean
Yeah, he
vocals are
does.
very unique. You know
He
what I
does
mean
like
though?
he adds like a little distortion on
Yeah.
top, you know? But
Yeah.
yeah, and he can do just straight cleans.
Yeah. So yeah, this is super cool, and I'm really excited about it. And I'm glad you answered some of these questions that I had and broke this down. Before I wrap this up with you, is there any last thing you'd like to say to anybody watching about this, or any other way that they could help?
I think just mentioning one of these, what I would say is like my greater goal overall, and I want to be clear that this isn't happening in this study, right? This study is very focused on the upper laryngeal structures, but the field of music therapy is expanding so quickly, and there are so many papers that document how voice is connected to treating all kinds of diseases. Especially, man, it's so compelling when you look, especially at the literature available and how voice interacts with anxiety, depression, uh,
I mean,
dementia.
Alzheimer's, dementia.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really amazing, and it's. I think that for me, not only is this study about learning how these sounds are made and how people can recreate them, but I'm looking at this greater picture of can we get these structures included in that research? Uh, so far, they've been totally absent.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point because I say this to people all the time. They're like, "How can you listen to all this screaming metal music and be calm?" And I'm like, "I can't explain it, but it
Exactly.
it helps relax me more than listening to a lot of other things." So that's
Exactly.
a good,
Exactly that.
it's a good, that would be a good study too.
And I think that people are very interested in setting specifically that. So just even the perception of the music and not the actual activation of the structures. There's so many good reasons why we should be looking at that. And I'm hoping that destigmatizing how these sounds are made and then also shining a light on all of these structures that are helping
Yeah.
create them will make it possible for upper laryngeal structures to be a part of that music therapy conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time for all this. I'm super excited to check it out. Whenever this, I mean, I'm mentally ready to wait like, a couple years at this point after talking to you. But when all of this stuff does get released, I think this is going to be a big game changer for a lot of the music industry, to be honest. And I'm very excited. So, thank you to you and all the researchers and everybody that's involved for what they're doing. And thank you for sitting down and answering some of the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Tink.